go now to Captain Armen Kurdian, a retired U.S. Navy captain and search and rescue analyst. Armen, thanks for joining us. I just, based on your experience, I'd like to know, do you think were some of the biggest challenges for rescue crews responding to a crash like this in the Hudson River?
Certainly. Good afternoon. Obviously, tragic circumstances to come in like this. The biggest problem that they have is obviously going to be time. When a helicopter crashes into water, it's going to invert because it's top heavy. It's the kind of training that I went through as a naval flight officer. When an aircraft goes down, it's going to, even if it's right side up, it's immediately going to flip over as it goes down and either sinks or at least floats as you see where it is. Now, some of the problems that the rescue folks would have, besides the question of time, is, are the rotor blades going to get in the way? Is there a chance that the exposed part of the helicopter may catch on fire, or other jagged edges, broken glass that could affect someone's suit? That water is very cold, and even in protective suits, you only have maybe 20, maybe 30 minutes at the outside before you can actually go. So they have to dive very close to try to get those guys out. But really, when you're under the water for that period of time, these passengers don't have the kind of training that I've had to get out. Plus, frankly, if you lose the rotor blade at any measure of altitude, even if it's just 50 feet, and then you crash ballistic into the water, you're going to, at the very least, be knocked unconscious on impact. And then, pretty much when that rotor goes, you're along for the ride. Sadly, there was probably at that point really nothing the pilot could do.
Wow. Okay. And Captain, you've also flown helicopters. What are some of the risks that pilots face when flying over water, especially in a densely populated area like New York City with very, very busy skyways?
Honestly, it really kind of depends on a lot of factors, whether it's the weather or whether it's ground. Helicopters tend to fly below corridors. I know we went through this whole thing in Reagan National Airport, where you had a helicopter at 500 feet crashing into a commercial aircraft on approach. But these corridors over the Hudson River are well flown, well traveled VFR corridors that you don't operate in if visibility is not good enough, if the winds aren't predictable. So they have to meet those minimum requirements, at least 3 miles of visibility in every direction in order to actually go out and fly. I believe below 500 feet, they have to fly, or perhaps higher if that's actually available. So that's something that you have to deal with. I wouldn't say the risks are any more or less flying over land or over water. Obviously, over water, if you go into the water in a controlled environment, you have to worry about exposure in the cold. If you go over land, then you have to worry about, are you going to come down possibly on, are you going to impact the ground hard? Are you going to run into a telephone pole or a tree or other thing which could make your descent go out of control? So really, it's just a question of, the situation you're in. Both are, I would say, it's not risky to fly a helicopter. It's not necessarily risky to fly a helicopter over land or over water. When something goes wrong is when you actually need to have those trained emergency procedures ready to go for whatever happens. So say if they lost engine power, he would have had enough torque left in the rotor blades to basically bring the aircraft down over land. But he had no rotor. So there's just nothing they could do.
I want to circle back to just talk a little bit more about what happened. How did this happen? What caused this apparent, what appears to be a malfunction from what we can tell, at least so far? So based on your experience, your expertise, I want to know, what's your instinct telling you?
So it could have been, but one of your guests, you had asked would it be an impact? Could something have impacted the helicopter between the rotor blades right there on the shaft to basically separate the rotors? And while that's theoretically possible, I don't know of any bird that would, number one, be so perfectly placed as to get through the blades and the helicopter and impact with such incredible force for a tourist helicopter that's probably only going maybe 30, 40 miles an hour to cause that to happen, which leaves one of two different options. Number one, there was a material failure. Something physically broke in the shaft, something physically broke in one of the blades that would cause a massive vibration that would have essentially caused the rotor to shake itself apart. That's one. Or two, something just came loose. Something wasn't fixed properly. Something wasn't attached properly. Or perhaps one of the fasteners actually failed that caused, say, a blade to actually come apart. In which case, now what they're going to do is they're going to look at when was the last time the aircraft was maintained? What was the last inspection? What came out? Did they have any problems with that shaft in the past? Were there any problems with the engine? Did they just replace the rotor blades? If they found a material failure, then they're going to want to go back and look at the rest of the Bell 206 helicopters, which may have those same parts to see if they're actually safe. The Bell 206 is actually a very safe helicopter. It's been around for a very long time, has a very good, solid safety record, and is exceptionally adept for these kinds of purposes. So,
you know, when I'm about ready to take a flight, when I'm about ready, you know, after I've boarded, sometimes if I'm sitting next to the window, I notice the pilots like outside checking out, you know, the airplane, looking at the tires, looking at the landing gear. What is standard operating procedure, if you can tell us, when it comes to helicopters? Are pilots usually sort of checking things? Is there a protocol in place?
Absolutely, and it's not just a pilot; it's the ground maintainers, especially for something that this is a commercial helicopter because people are paying to go fly on that helicopter. So what are they doing? They're going to check the tail rotor. Are all the fasteners there? Is it properly attached? Are all the skin panels properly attached? Or is the pitot-static tubes, you know, for air temperature and those kinds of things, are they free of debris? Are there any cracks in the window? Are there any leaks? Are there any? Do you see any visible fluids? Kinds of things. And the maintainers, you know, they're checking the engine. You know, when's the last time the engine was serviced? The pilot's reading the maintenance logbook. When was the last time it was serviced? How much oil is there? You know, how much fuel do I have? So it is a combined effort between the pilot and the folks who actually maintain that helicopter to actually go and check these kinds of things. If it was a material failure or something that was well inside the aircraft, nobody would have seen that on a pre-flight inspection. I don't believe they would have.
And Captain, I want to remind our viewers we are still waiting on a press conference update from the mayor that could be happening at any moment. So if we have to cut you off, I apologize in advance.
Certainly.
But when that happens, we will go right to that. In the meantime, though, another question for you here. The Bell 206, it's been around for, I think, 80 years, 1960s maybe. You can correct me if I'm wrong. What kind of information will this helicopter, even in its current state, be able to provide investigators as to why it went down? I know it may or may not have what a lot of people recognize as a black box, but there are other forms of recording, altitude, engines, fuselage, like you said. What else on board could help everybody kind of piece this one together?
Well, the aircraft would have a transponder. It would have what's called ADS-B, I believe. Most aircraft have that, which is a method of basically broadcasting outside of the aircraft. This is as fast as I'm going. This is my altitude. This is who I am. And then, you know, some vehicles also have a way of sucking in that information. You would have air traffic control. It would be on radar, so they would cross-check what air traffic control was showing on its radar and transponder with what the aircraft was reporting. And then at that point, it's also a question of what was the position of the flight controls, the position of the cyclic and the stick and the controls basically that the pilot had. Of course, it's possible that it might have changed depending on what the aircraft is, but some of these systems may have a computer that is recording this data that could actually be recovered and pulled out. So it's really kind of depend on the configuration of this aircraft. But really what they're going to be doing is once they pull that aircraft out, and they're going to take a look and see what happened at the top. Look at a clean break, or if they see something that was actually wrenched. You know, as hard as that aircraft hit the water, it wouldn't be necessarily something so powerful that I think it would actually break the shaft. So if you see the shaft is actually broken or torn, the engineers will know what kind of stresses would cause what kind of damage. So really, that's going to be your first thing. They're going to pull it out. They're going to take a look at it, because if there is some kind of material failure, which could be systemic to other parts or some other maintenance procedure that was not followed properly, which could have possibly been done on other helicopters, they need to know that as soon as possible.
All right. Armen Kurdian, retired captain with the U.S. Navy. Thank you for your insight. You've been very helpful to help us understand the different possible scenarios and what is next to come. We do appreciate your time.
Certainly. Have a nice day.